Attention, small business owners and creatives. Are you looking for the perfect audience to share your brand story with? Well, the Girl Get Up podcast reaches ambitious professionals across key markets filled with decision makers in government, tech, and business, such as DC and Texas. But here's what makes this opportunity special. Our listeners span 33 countries across 6 continents. That means your brand has both national impact and global exposure. Whether you're offering productivity tools, online courses, women's empowerment products, or services that support career growth or entrepreneurship, this audience is for you. The Girl Get Up audience are filled with action takers who invest in their development and support brands that aligns with their values. And we're growing organically every week. The Girl Get Up podcast has loyal listeners and a community of dreamers and doers who are ready to discover brands like yours. Are you ready to connect with an audience that's already listening? Or visit my stand store or send me a message to explore sponsorship packages designed specifically for small businesses and creatives. The Girl Get Up podcast is the podcast where your brand meets your people. Now let's get into the episode for today. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Girl Get Up podcast. I am your host, the Aquarian Chancellor, and this is the podcast where I share my stories. I bring my guests on, they share their stories, and we dig into a little bit of celebrity stories, all in hopes that inspires you, the listening audience, to go out and discover your infinite possibilities. So I am so glad that you're here with me on today's Aquarian Insights episode, which was kind of inspired by one of my favorite success stories, Mr. Gordy. So today's episode is called Cycles of Success, Transforming Setbacks into a Rebrand Strategy. I have kind of been putting this episode off just a little bit, and let me get into why. Okay, so I had an opportunity a while back to watch a documentary that detailed the kind of like the making of Motown. And it just talks about the birth of Motown and how he, when I say he, I mean Berry Gordy, founded the record label. Okay, and so in that documentary, he said something when he was talking about the process of building a label and building his artists. He said something that was like struck a chord with me. It just echoed in my mind. And he said that his process was called the cycle of success. And I was like, my ears tweaked up. I was like, oh, that is good. That was his framework for establishing one of the most historical music labels in the music industry. I don't even want to put a color on it because what he was able to achieve around his label, around his artists, that actually had a worldwide impact. You can go to any country in the world and you sing some of the songs of the Supremes and the Temptations. I mean, global impact. Okay. Like I said, as I'm listening to him speak, that term cycle of success, it kind of it resonated with me, and I said, oh wow, like I have to talk about that. Like I have to incorporate that in one of my podcast episodes. I did not know which one, so I was kind of holding on to it just a little bit. And last week's episode 94, I Am the Message, having Donnie Landon talking about his story and his transformation process, it kind of made me want to go back and pull this episode out. I thought it would be the perfect time to talk about my workbook, the Personal Transformation Workbook. Okay, and so this Hitsville documentary was not the first documentary that I've seen about Motown. What's interesting about Hitsville, the Making of Motown, was that it incorporated more perspective from Gordy himself. So that is a perfect segue for me to talk about what inspired the business of music behind Motown and the 6 elements of his cycle of success. So let's go ahead and let's get into it. Now, I have always thought that Gordy was a visionary. But when I watched the documentary, I realized he's not only a visionary, but he is also a student. In his early career, Gordy worked for the Ford Motor Company, which back in those days was very important to the Black community because it established a middle class there with the wages that they were paying. While Gordy was working at Ford Motor Company, he became a student of the way that they did their business, the way that they did their assembly line work and their quality control systems. Okay, so he was very observant. He became a student and he learned about business processes through his environment. He did this all while pursuing his personal aspirations of being a writer. So as he's working at the Ford Motor Company, he had this little side gig writing music. That took him on a journey. Eventually he got in a position to be able to create a label and bring other artists on. The Supremes and Temptations, all of these, like I was saying earlier, global names, artists who are legendary. Their music is still a staple. And so when Mr. Gordy had an opportunity to establish his own label, he applied those very same strategies to the business behind the music, the business behind music production, and the business behind the development of artists. Okay, the business processes that he developed is what he calls Gordy's cycle of success. Okay? And so there were 6 elements of Gordy's cycle of success. It was A, artist development, B, quality control, C, internal competition, D, targeted marketing, E, empowered teams, and F, building a brand. Listening to his story and what he was able to create, not only just for himself, but for hundreds of families, Black families at that, and made them millionaires and gave them global exposure. It was a testament to his story, all by one person having a vision bigger than their current circumstances. So his story took me right to my own personal transformation workbook, my own internal process of rebranding myself or expanding past my current circumstance at the time. I've written it back in 2022. And it was the strategies that I had developed as my own cycle of success. It doesn't, life don't ask us for permission to change. We just have to develop the mindset to get on board. Get on board past feeling disconnected from our current environments. Get on board to grow past feeling unfulfilled in our lives, or just as if we're just going through the motions, when life is happening and encouraging you and forcing you through these experiences to go deeper. And so I am going to share that cycle with you all. What I've learned over the years is that every decision that I made, or you will make, every organization that I volunteered at, or you will volunteer at, every opportunity that I take part in, or you will take part in your life, is all a part of building your own personal brand. So I want to share those with you in hopes that it helps you if you are in a phase of rebranding or transforming your life past a current setback, in hopes that it inspires you to think about your life in a different way, see past your current circumstances, create a plan for yourself and a strategy to take action. Okay, so phase number 1 of my cycle of success for me was the awakening process. For me, that question of purpose was coming up. What I had eventually realized is that the current situation that I was in, I had already served my purpose. This is internal. This is an internal process. I had already done the things that I needed to do and accomplish in that life. When you're in situations where you no longer recognize your environment, or you no longer recognize your place in that environment, it doesn't fit you anymore. Okay, so you achieved everything that you needed to achieve in that current circumstances. And for me, that question of what's next, okay, kept coming up. Once you served your purpose in one situation or one phase in your life, and it is time for you to put away old things and move on, if you delay that process, you cause yourself more harm. Things start happening in your life to push you out of that circumstance or out of that situation, out of that environment. And the longer you stay there, knowing in your mind those conversations like, okay, something ain't right about this. And when you try to drag those things with you, it gets heavier and heavier. Coming to realize, oh, wait a minute. It's me that's keeping certain things going. It's me. All because of the decisions that I was making. In any relationship where I want to be valued, whether it's at work, whether it's at home, whether it's in my business, whether it's in my community, and my intentions are to help, my intentions are to contribute and be a part of growth and something positive, but I can't be my true self. I can't be free. I don't have to worry about feeling constrained and constricted. Then that is not an environment for me. So that awakening phase for me was about recognizing, okay, this is not good. This is not. I don't even recognize myself in this situation anymore. How I was treating myself, because it all starts with the self. I have given up somewhere inside of me. And I had to get honest about that. And that was my first awakening, or that moment where you just snap to reality to start questioning everything. So if anything that I have said strikes a chord with you or echoes in your mind, here are some awakening questions that you can ask yourself. For me, I was asking myself, what truth am I avoiding about my current reality? When was the last time I felt genuinely alive and engaged in my environment and with my people, places, and things? Phase 2 for me was the reckoning. You can just kind of like say this was the surrender phase where everything in my life just came to a screeching halt. Like once I realized, okay, hold on, wait a minute. Something has to change, and that something was me. When you change, everything else around you is going to change. And if you're not careful, this is where that mental health and that the way that you talk to yourself throughout that process is so important. Because if you judge yourself harshly based on the past or based on everyone else's feedback of you, because everybody's not going to like it. And you have to be mentally strong. You got to not make excuses. Because if you have a vision for yourself far beyond than where you are, and you know, and you get this, this is what I'm talking about that prayer thing. If you are not mentally strong and you're going to let that guilt keep you stuck, and you're going to be questioning yourself like, okay, is this really for me? No, maybe I should just stay where I'm at, just a little bit longer. Oh, it's not that bad. Or, you're going to feel bad for wanting more. You're going to feel bad for wanting to do better. People are going to make you feel bad. Those old familiar places is going to make you feel good. It's going to feel like home. But then in the back of your mind, it's like, no, it's going to be that internal battle that you need to face. And you need to be honest with yourself. And you need to take full ownership of where you are and where you want to go. Here are some of the questions that I asked myself when I was trying to make that determination in my life during this reckoning phase. And it was, where am I making excuses instead of making moves? Question number 2, what reality am I avoiding because it requires me to change? Becoming that more self-assured person in my life about my decisions required me to be more confrontational about my feelings, about my thoughts, about my opinions, instead of being there, oh, okay, I'm going to go along to get along, to avoid knowing that every time I did that, I dishonored myself. But in that reckoning phase, I had to be honest and surrendered those behaviors and say, you know what? From this moment on, you can't do that. Okay, so here we are at phase 3, the reconstruction process. From limiting beliefs about myself, who I was, to an empowered identity. Now, this is where the rebrand part comes in, because now that I knew, I was aware, I became aware of the decisions that I was making and or not making. I was aware that I wanted a change. I wanted to feel connected to my environment. I wanted to feel like I had purpose in my environment. Once I got to the acknowledgement part and I surrendered that behavior. I surrendered that thinking, and I wanted to chart out a path for myself with this new empowered feeling that I had. Like, okay, I can change. I am powerful. I had to rebrand my thoughts, starting with my attitude first. Personally, I learned to develop a more optimistic mindset, which I call the attitude of altitude. Meaning, anytime something came up in my mind about, oh, well, you know, you can't do this or you can't do that, it meant flipping that thing around, transforming negative thoughts or limiting beliefs about myself into something that was a little bit more optimistic and positive, and not giving that responsibility over to other people. If there was a story that or narrative that I wanted to live in my life, write it down first, because that's the most powerful thing that you can do, is write it down. Take that narrative and create an action plan or a to-do list. Make it look like a to-do list and start checking those boxes as you go along. But that responsibility was on me to change that narrative and to change that story. Going from living in low-income apartments to having your own home, or having a job at CVS to a business that generates an annual income of $1.5 million. Like, but it all starts in the mind first. So here are some reconstruction questions that I asked myself during this time. One was, whose voice is actually speaking when I am in that moment of self-doubt? Is that coming from someone else's concern? Is that coming from what my mother, something that my mother told me 20 years ago that it has always stuck with me in my mind, but I didn't really realize it? The next question I would ask myself is, what would I believe about myself if I believed I was worthy? So if I was at my highest peak or living my best life, what would be my thoughts of myself then? If you've achieved your version of success, how would you feel about yourself? Would you feel like you was worthy of it? And if not, why? Again, is it still those conditioning, the thoughts that we have about ourselves that say you don't deserve it? And that's what I mean when I say sometimes you could be living your version of success and you wouldn't even recognize it, because in your mind you always have to have more. Like, you can never be comfortable with where you are, because you, in your mind, you never deserve it because of something that you were taught about yourself, that you weren't worthy. So you always on the search for better. And once you have it, it never makes you feel good. You can never be comfortable with it. And then my last question in that reconstruction phase is, what does my empowered identity look like and sound like? So for me, like vision boards, let me tell you something about that vision board. Let me tell you something, like, yes, every year that is my practice to do a vision board and start designing what my empowered identity, what my empowered future looks like. Phase 4 is all about the strategy. How you go from infinite dreams to a defined reality. Because we all know that transformation without a direction is just energy in motion all over the place. But when you take your output from that previous step, which is a defined narrative about what your version of success looks like, what you're going to then do is take that narrative and break that down into actionable steps and systems that will help you bring that narrative to life. This is what you're doing. You're ordering your steps. So you're taking ownership of your time. You're taking ownership of your resources. You're taking ownership of your energy. You're going to start tracking your goals. You're going to start tracking your critical success factors. Like, what were some of your successes? What were some of your failures? Why were there failures? Is this something that you can improve on? Is this something that you can learn from to help you make better decisions? All of that is going to help you bring your new brand or your new version of yourself to life. Here are some strategy questions that you can ask yourself during this phase. What are the milestones that will mark my progress? How do I know that I'm successful? Let's just say you wanted to write a book. You have a completed book. That is a milestone. Okay, what systems do I need to sustain this transformation? And who do I need to become and achieve the goals that I have set for myself? This is where your community comes in. Phase 5 is the process of proof phase. This is where all of the work that you have put in throughout your cycle of success, throughout your transformation process becomes evident. Everyone else around you, even you first, sometimes you're the last one to kind of notice because you just so locked in. You know, when you get locked in like that, it kind of shifts some of the relationships in your life, because once you get locked in and you've achieved a goal, naturally you can be like, okay, I'm on to the next step. Like, and so you just not connected to what you used to be connected to. And that is okay. All that is just confirmation that your cycle of success is on target. And you are ready to, once you've achieved that goal, you're ready to go to set your sights on higher heights. That's it. Keep going, because it's going to be another area of your life where you can improve. Okay. But that's the process to proof phase. When you get to this phase, you can start reflecting back and even patting yourself on the back. So I hope you guys have been able to take something from me sharing my personal transformation or my personal cycle of success, how I was able to transform my life and my circumstances, and feeling good about my life and feeling good about my environment and feeling positive, and to really being proud of myself. I think that's the best way to say it. And so I live out my days now being more conscious about my decisions and making decisions, choosing to really be an active participant in my own life. Because one thing that I learned is that transformation and change and rebranding when it comes to business. But one thing I will say is your brand always starts with you as the person first. Your mindset before it starts anywhere else. Before it can show up in your visuals, before it can show up in your values, before it can show up in your voice, it has to start in the mind first. It's going to show up in your thinking. Once you've always come to that last phase of change and in your cycle of success, once you come to that last phase and you've improved one area of your life, it's like you're going to start looking at your life completely different. And it's going to set you on a new journey. And that new journey is going to take you to a higher level. Okay, so here are some rebranding your life principles that you can incorporate when you start to develop your own cycle of success. So today I took you through my personal 5 phases. What you should do after you listen to this episode is start to reflect on your life and you develop your own phase cycle of success phases. Okay, but take these principles with you. Number 1, you cannot rebrand or transform what you refuse to acknowledge. That's going to be your first step. Principle number 2, acceptance without action is just agreement with your current circumstance. Principle number 3, your internal brand narrative determines your external brand expression. Change the story, change your life. You can start your life over anytime you want. And finally, principle number 3, a brand without an action plan or a rollout strategy is just wishful thinking. You got to actually implement. I have a $8 monthly planner in my store right now. No excuses. Get your life in order. Order your steps. Okay? So, in closing, I hope you all understand my cycle of success and had an opportunity to take some of the things that I have talked about, jotting those things down, and will help you to create your own cycle of success. So before I let you go, I will leave you with this. Your transformation is not a destination. It's a cycle that continues for your elevation. Each time you move through these phases, you step into a more powerful version of yourself. And this is going to help you become aware of your infinite possibilities. So with that, everyone, take care, and I will see you next episode.